Today, I'm visiting the beautiful Dean's Court, a Georgian country house in the center of the historic market town of Wimborne in Dorset. This is a house with monastic roots dating back to the 8th century.
I'll be delving into the family archives with William and Allie Hannam, whose family has lived here for nearly 500 years.
This is a historic home brimming with fascinating stories to tell.
This is early 8th century. 705 AD was the date that the monastery was founded.
This is the sort of classic 1930s.
I'm left speechless by the beauty of the decoration and the creativity of the women who have lived here, past and present. I can't resist lending a hand as a shepherdess.
I got a little bit left. I want to give it to you. Come on.
And I wade in to give fly fishing a whirl.
Lovely.
And fish upstream.
Oh. That would make sense.
How are you?
Oh, I'm great, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to
so
Dean's
much
Court.
for having me.
When I married into the British aristocracy, it was the start of a wonderfully exciting journey. But it was also a little daunting. I became a Viscountess, and for an American girl from a small town outside Chicago, that was quite a shock.
I live with my husband Luke, heir to the Earl of Sandwich, and our family at Mapperton House in Dorset. Mapperton is a glorious sandstone house dating originally from the 1540s. It is known as Britain's finest manor house, and it is full of wonderful treasures collected by Luke's ancestors.
Living in a place like this is a joy, but also a challenge. And every day we're aware that we're preserving a very special part of Britain's heritage. Mapperton has opened up an extraordinary new world for me, and I can't wait to share it with you all.
So if you love castles and manors and stately homes as much as I do, please join me as I head off to visit some of Britain's most spectacular historic homes.
On these trips, I'll be meeting other owners who manage these large houses and estates, as well as some of the fantastic people who work there too. With them, I'll be exploring the history, the landscapes, and the innovations of generations past and present. And I'm particularly keen to meet the remarkable women who, like me, have married into these families, bringing new ideas, energy, and more than a touch of style.
I'll be sure to roll up my sleeves and help out with a few jobs along the way.
Is there a snake in here?
Yeah.
What? What?
So please join this American Viscountess as I journey into the British countryside in search of some of Britain's finest historic houses.
So nice to finally be here.
Oh, welcome to Dean's Court. It's good to have you here.
So nice, Allie. I've been wanting, as you know, I've been wanting to come here.
I know.
Because you are practically neighbors.
I know. 45 minutes away.
Exactly.
Come through. Yeah, come down here. William's here. Looking forward to seeing you again.
Hello. Good, how are you? So nice to see you. And oh my goodness.
Oh, okay, so this is
a baby.
A baby.
So exciting.
This is Lottie.
Hello.
And my daughter, and Dan, her husband, and baby Maisie.
Hi.
They've been living with us for 18 months.
Look at that.
Yeah.
We kind of moved in at the beginning of COVID and never left.
And never left. Well, I can't wait to learn more about the history of Dean's Court, because just walking up here, It's just extraordinary. I mean,
Did you get a sense when you walked in of sort of tranquility and an oasis of calm?
absolutely. That's what I found was so extraordinary, because all of a sudden I arrive here and knowing that steps away is Wimborne, and it's tranquil, it's beautiful, it's serene.
What this goes back to, I like to think, is that there was a monastery here a very long time ago.
Thank you.
And I think that sense, that feeling of sort of almost spiritual tranquility still pervades the gardens here. I'm glad you picked up.
Yeah, no, I absolutely did. But the history of Dean's Court, I know that it dates, it's 8th century. Yeah, so that's originally 8th century, but then it's been added on.
Yeah. So there's an 8th century house buried in the core of the building, which we'll show you later. But there's a Georgian wrap around the sides.
Yeah, I mean, it's Georgian. And when did you actually take over the running of Dean's Court?
About 12, 13 years ago, I started coming down from London to take over. But we really didn't move in until,
About
10 or 11 years?
11 years ago.
Yeah.
We tried, as probably a lot of people do at the beginning, to keep our businesses going.
Yeah.
I had an antique business in Gloucestershire, William had an art business in London, but within a few years we realised this was not going to be possible. No. So actually we just moved in and started our own businesses here.
Right, because when you move into these historic houses, they become your business. I mean, that's what's happened now. That's what's changed so much over the past really 50 years. So this is your business, and then as far as renovations, because I know what it's like living in these historic houses, it's constant repairing and restoring. What have you both done since you moved in 10 years ago?
Well, we put 2 new bathrooms in it.
And the very first central heating. We put a few radiators in downstairs, but before that it was just fires or you froze. That was
fires, you froze, and there was only one place to use a bathroom.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's right.
People used to arrive for the weekend, and they would literally, in the winter, not take their coats off. We've got some rooms that were redecorated in the 1930s, which we'll show you, and actually we won't change them.
Great.
And that's a very important feature, I think, of looking after a house like this. You want to keep it up to date, you want to keep it as a modern, livable in home.
Yes.
But every time we do a makeover in one room, we try to keep a few elements of the previous generations so that the story and the continuity works.
And then you get that layered look, which is what we all absolutely love about all these historic houses.
Yeah, because it's like you want to be able to walk into a room that has your touch, your legacy in it, but also at the same time, it's combining everybody else who's been in that room before you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So making sure all those elements stay within the room, but you're adding into that as well for future generations.
I feel you've always got to keep adding, or else they literally don't move forward, do they? And then they get stuck in the.
And you're living in a museum.
You're living in a museum. So you've got to constantly keep changing them a little bit.
This is what I really like about these historic houses that are still privately owned, lived in by the families, because they're not museums.
No.
We're continuing to evolve, and we're continuing to add on, and we're continuing to really add to the stories that only we can tell when we have people come for weddings, come to the shop, come to the restaurant. And that's what makes these historic houses so much more interesting in my mind to come and visit and see, because it is living history. I mean, this really is living heritage, living history right here.
Absolutely. And this house is a lovely example of that, because every single moment in English history for the last 1,300 years has left an imprint, particularly in the last 500 years.
Well, I'd love to go see some more.
Great. Should we do that?
Yeah,
okay.
Perfect. You lead the way.
Right.
So I can really start to tell now the difference between what you've done with this paint and then this.
Yeah, these rather startling colours. These are the old original colours which defined the difference between the staff quarters of the house and the non-staff quarters. We mentioned the earliest part of the house, and these 2 rooms in here and in there formed the Saxon part of the house. And you can see that it's actually built of very thick masonry. Those 2 arches over there were punched through in 1725. But this was the hall house. But you've got to use a lot of imagination, because you'd have probably had a hearth in the middle of the floor here with a hole in the roof to let the smoke out. And there'd have probably been straw on the floor, dogs, livestock in the undercroft underneath to keep the place warm. But it would have been very busy because this was the beating heart of the Saxon monastery. And
Wonderful.
And it was built by a very royal person called Cuthberga. She was the sister of the King of Wessex, and she was the wife or the consort of the King of Northumbria. And that marriage sealed an alliance between Wessex and Northumbria. But this was where she lived. So this was the royal palace of Wimborne. And her quarters would have been in what we call the solar next door there. But this is where the sort of general day-to-day business of the administration of the monastery went on.
So remind me again, what century am I literally standing in right now?
This is early 8th century. 705 AD was the date that the monastery was founded, and we think that this house was built at the same time. So yeah, 1300 years people have been living and working in this house.
It's incredible.
It is. So that's the first 800 years.
Right.
Do you want to go and check out the next 500 years?
Yeah, because
Should we have a look at that, when my family became involved?
Right, so even, I mean, here I am 1300 years, but also it's, you know, it's quite a feat that this has been in your family for nearly 500 years.
Yeah, but not a lot of families who can say that.
Right.
Yeah.
William is the 13th baronet to live at Dean's Court. Generations of his ancestors look out from the walls, reminding us of the previous lives lived here. It was in the mid-16th century when the family first took up residence.
So that brings us to this character here, John Hannam, who was a MP for Poole, and he was one of the commissioners for Dorset. And when Henry VII died, Edward VI's government sent in the commissioners of Dorset to break up the church lands, of which it was still the property of the church.
So that was the end of the 800 years,
That was the end of the church's,
Right.
ownership of the land. And he basically redistributed most of it to himself.
Right, because he was the MP, so they gave him the job and they said, right, you've got to...
Yeah, he did it all legally though. It was all above board. He was a very eminent lawyer in the Middle Temple in London. So he assigned himself a lease to start with, and then his son took over and bought the freehold.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. But so when he saw this place, of course, he thought, well, I'm going to have this.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it suited him down to the ground. He was also looking for a wife at the same time. And in 1548, he picked out the richest heiress in Wimborne and married her. So this was a very good year for him, indeed.
So this is, though, a Tudor painting.
This is a lovely, portrait. It's probably done in the year 1548, but it's by an Anglo-Flemish artist, we should say. We don't know who exactly. The closest painter is someone called Stephen van der Meulen, who did come to England, but a little bit later than this. But what it shows is a man presenting himself in a sort of mercantile style.
Right.
As a wealthy man, this is the whole point. The gloves that he presents are a sign of affluence. And of course the signet ring, which tells us about his family. But the ruff and the hat and the whole style of the painting just sort of shouts, I'm doing well, I'm wealthy, and I'm going places.
Right.
Yeah. But it's a beautiful painting, and it's probably the best one we've got in the house.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful.
But he would have paid that painter with his new wife's money.
Right.
But the sad thing is he didn't accord her the same high quality portrait as he did to himself.
Oh.
Here she is.
Oh yeah. There's a big difference.
There's a big divide, there's a big quality gap here. They're not even a pair because she doesn't face him, so this is a pendant. It's obviously done later than his own portrait, but he was very keen to establish himself at first with his own portrait, and I think this was an afterthought done by a much less expensive painter.
And what is she holding there? Gloves.
She's holding gloves as well.
Right,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Okay.
It was her money after all.
Okay.
But she's called Alice Orange.
Okay.
She's nothing to do with the Dutch House of Orange. This is before all that happened.
Okay, before.
So this is a French name. It was Alice de Orange.
Right.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
But there you go.
It was the third baronet, Sir William Hannam, in the mid-18th century who transformed the layout and appearance of Dean's Court. The Saxon Great Hall was wrapped in a sequence of Georgian rooms, and the facade of the building we see today was added. Each generation adapts these historic homes to their taste, and the library was the first room William and Allie decorated when they moved in.
I hope you are having as much fun watching these episodes of American Viscountess as I am making them. It is so important to bring history to life and to celebrate these wonderful places. But we need your help as we rely entirely on the support of our patrons who help cover the costs of production. Please do join our community of supporters by becoming a patron at patreon.com/American Viscountess. Here you'll get early access to all the episodes as well as a lot of other behind the scenes benefits. I really look forward to seeing you there.
So this is the library.
Oh wow, I can see you've definitely redecorated in here. This is lovely paint color.
Yeah, this is the first room that Ali and I set about painting. The thing about this room was it was unbelievably dark when we came in here, because it was actually a very dark turquoise colour, but all the window surrounds and the door surrounds and the fireplace surround was all covered in this wood graining. This is actually just painted wood graining from the 1930s. So you can imagine with the bookshelves and everything, this place was just so gloomy. And what we did was try to drag the light in from outside. It's cheered the room up.
It's wonderful. And what do we have here then?
So this is a little group of objects which relate to an ancestor of mine called Captain John Hannam, who fought very bravely in the first Sikh wars in the Punjab, which were not very well known about these battles, but they were some of the bloodiest in British history. And here we have a letter that he wrote home in 1845 from his tent in the
this
Punjab.
battle is around, so he's fighting in sort of mid-1800s,
1840s, yeah.
1840s,
yeah.
Okay.
These are the medals he got from the three main battles. And
so
while
he was quite a hero then.
He was a hero. He came home, quite decorated and, a heroic survivor.
Very decorated.
But he came back to England. He was posted to Preston in Lancashire. He married. He had a wife called Amy, who's a very interesting personality as well. But they were living up there, even though they had Dean's Court. And this was their home.
So this was his home.
Yeah.
He comes back after, and he's married, but then they move away.
Being in the army, he had to go where he was posted. One day in 1861, he punished a very young 18-year-old Irish private very, very severely for a tiny little infraction. He'd sent him to get the names of some children that were bothering some of the staff. And he went out and he could only get one name because the children ran away. And he came back and reported this to Captain Hannam and the colonel, and they put the poor private on a charge. And that was a very nasty business in those days. You were constantly having to get up in the middle of the night and clean your kit, and you were humiliated by having to walk around the barracks and salute all the sentries.
Oh my God. So he was this 18-year-old Irish
18-year-old Irish man,
was really punished.
And he went and got his musket and he loaded it.
No.
Yeah, and he waited in the barracks, by a wall in the barracks, until Captain John Hannam and the colonel came walking across. And he took aim. He was a very good shot. And the bullet went through the colonel first of all, and then lodged in Captain Hannam. And the colonel died within a few hours, but Captain Hannam took 2 days to die with his wife beside him, taking instructions about how to manage his estate after he'd gone.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, and she wrote very, very heavily about this afterwards, and we have a very long letter here.
No. Well, and it has obviously, it's got the black border around it.
Yeah, that's the mourning.
The mourning,
when you wrote letters, when you were in mourning, that's
when you're in mourning.
Right. But in that letter, she describes how when he was dying, he actually forgave the private that had shot him. And he said, I hope to go in peace. And that includes the man, who's killed me.
And I can see even in here, because it says, "Dear children," but it says Monday, the 9th of September, 1861. We started a very happy and merry party. So she's really describing the day to her children in this letter.
Yeah, they wake up. It's a normal day. He goes off to work.
Can I touch this?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. She has so much to say. You can see
she
it
does. Yes, it's a long old letter. But she was a wonderful writer, his wife Amy, and she wrote copiously about all sorts of other things. What you get from her writings, not this, but also other writings, is the incredible despair and grief that she felt at the murder of her husband. This wasn't just a marriage for financial reasons or anything. This was a real marriage of love, and she was absolutely destroyed by the death. And you'll see here, we have a little box which says, "The bullet that made me a widow."
No.
Amy Ursula Kyle, those, Hannam, those are her initials.
Which she has, this is the bullet.
This is the bullet that made me a widow, and there it is.
Did she write in?
Yes, and there she is written on the day that he died, this extraordinary sort of outpouring.
On thee their life blood lies, O fatal, cruel, O loved, O darling one. These are all exclamation points. How long must I there mourn? Make thou me strong at duty's call. Let duty's path be short.
So she wants to die.
She wants to go off.
She wants to die.
go after him, yeah.
When his dear children know thy name, O call me from this world, washed with my Savior's blood. Let me be where he is, let me go.
Yeah. After the trial of the Irish private, who was called McCaffrey,
Right.
and it was sent to her by the local police, the police constable, and we've got the sort of letter that came with that as well. But the interesting thing about McCaffrey was that he was obviously sentenced to death, and he was publicly executed in January 1862 outside Preston jail. But it was the penultimate public hanging in the country. They stopped doing them soon after that.
Right, so he was hung.
He was hung, yeah, and in front of a crowd of 35,000, mainly Irish onlookers, who'd come out in disgust at the whole thing. They'd heard the story, and of course there'd been the trial, and they were on his side, and they hated the British Army. All of these.
So the 35,000
35,000
that came out were actually on his side, on the Irishmen's side.
Because they were predominantly Irish. It was hugely written up by the press, particularly by the time we got to McCaffrey's execution in January. But this is four days after he died. His body is put on a train from Preston down to Wimborne. It arrives 8 hours late, so it's quite nice to know that it's that trains actually did not run on time in those days. And so the funeral, which was supposed to take place at midday, took place at night at 8 p.m. And they marched from Wimborne station to the cemetery, and 2,000 residents of Wimborne turned out to pay their respects.
How unbelievably heartbreaking, though, this story. I mean, heartbreaking on both levels. You know, you've got somebody who was murdered, and now you've got the widow who's absolutely beside herself, heartbroken. But then you have this 18-year-old Irish boy who was also executed.
And the press, when they wrote it up, said he looks like a child. He looked like a 12-year-old.
Oh, I can't even, I mean, that gives me chills. That gives me chills.
It's a sad story.
It's just very, very sad story.
Amy Hannam retreated to Dean's Court in deep mourning. Following Victorian social convention, she dressed in black and muted tones of gray and purple. Her room here is painted in the same color scheme.
So this is the mauve room.
It's stunning. I mean, it's really stunning. I mean, if you're in mourning, I would like to be in this room because there's something, even though you're in mourning, at least there's a little bit of cheerfulness here.
Yeah, and it's a nice calming colour actually. I mean, even if it wasn't to do with mourning, it would still be quite an interesting scheme.
And so is this the original, I mean, it looks...
This isn't the original paint, this is why it looks in quite good nick, because in the 1980s it was falling off, it was peeling, so my parents actually just replicated the exact colour scheme. So this is how it looks.
How extraordinary and wonderful for your parents to keep it as Amy had it.
Yeah.
That's what's so fascinating. Yeah. Oh, it is wonderful, but you're right, it's such a calming effect.
Yeah, and the panelling's lovely, and the panelling's been turned into cupboards.
Oh, yeah,
which is quite fun.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, very practical.
Very practical.
Yeah, so they turned these into shelves, a bit of storage there.
It's fantastic.
But this is a piece of social history, I think, which is really important to hang on to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Coming up next time on American Viscountess at Dean's Court, Allie and I meet James, who tends the organic kitchen garden, and I'm given an enthusiastic welcome by Orlando and Pringles.
I just don't want to really leave here with another phobia of another animal, goats.